Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1632, and today we're going to wrap up by summarizing essentially where we stand after The Last Jedi with the additional information that we know thanks to the final story arc in the Poe Dameron comic book series. And the main things that I want to call to your attention include, first of all, what actually remains of the Resistance. Now, the Resistance, of course, was founded by Leia Organa, who went from princess to senator to now general, and the Resistance was pretty much decimated after the events of The Last Jedi. In fact, according to Leia, there were a dozen or so people on the Falcon. And so that's essentially what remains of the Resistance, with the exception of the 4 pilots from Black Squadron that were sent out on the additional mission to try and drum up Resistance support as soon as possible. So even though they have managed to drum up support from the Ikruk system, that just says that, you know, the First Order isn't going to get a foothold in that sector, according to the fine folks on Ikruk. Doesn't mean that they actually have additional folks flying into the Resistance, because that would mean that they're actually leaving that sector and taking the fight to the First Order. And so far, we don't have that indication. So right now, if it's a dozen or so plus 4, so less than 2 dozen, call it even 2 dozen if you wanted to, call it 20 people that comprise the Resistance. That's pretty much it for where our heroes stand. And for all intents and purposes, what the First Order is telling their people is relatively accurate, in the sense that when Poe Dameron calls or hails one of the First Order vessels over Grail City, they think that this is ridiculous because Poe Dameron is supposed to be dead. In fact, the First Order propaganda that's being sent around is that the entire Resistance was destroyed at Dakar and there were no survivors there. So they don't know what's actually going on, and the rest of the galaxy is being told a, you know, somewhat false story. I mean, the Resistance is down to 20 people, so I'd say that's pretty well decimated. But actually, come to think of it, our good friend Quizmaster Joe likes to point out that the phrase decimated actually means 1 out of 10 being lost. And so technically speaking, that's not the actual correct word for the situation. All but eliminated, we'll say. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, the other thing is that the First Order doesn't necessarily seem to know, at least broadly, about what happened while they were pursuing the remains of the Resistance. In other words, they don't necessarily know that Supreme Leader Snoke is dead. They don't necessarily know that the Supremacy, his flagship, has been destroyed. And they don't necessarily know that another 20 Star Destroyers were destroyed as part of the Big Bang that Admiral Holdo, Vice Admiral Amelin Holdo created when she sent the Raddus on its suicide course right into the heart of the Supremacy. So there's a lot of information that the First Order is shutting down, and you know, it's kind of interesting to wonder how they're getting a grasp on it, considering that, you know, Kylo Ren is running the show now, and you've got General Hux. General Hux is probably the one who is orchestrating the misinformation campaign within the First Order and across the galaxy, I would imagine, because I cannot see Ben Solo being too concerned with all of those particulars after the events of The Last Jedi. I think he's got a little bit more on his mind in relation to his family and all the stuff that's happened there. Now, as far as the Resistance's ability to rebuild itself, and in particular on the Force user side of things, Rey being able to rebuild the strength of the Resistance by rebuilding the Jedi Order or something akin to it, well, we found out that C-3PO is actually going to be a very vital part of that rebuilding effort, because he's going to have to translate the ancient sacred Jedi texts for her. So, you know, he actually has a crucial role to play. Somebody else that we find out who has a crucial role to play, surprise, surprise, is a gangster known as Gracchus the Hutt. And Gracchus, at this point, according to Poe Dameron, is the only one taking the Resistance's calls. So Gracchus is actually willing to help the Resistance in some fashion, which is kind of fascinating because, you know, the New Republic wasn't exactly supportive of the Hutts and the, you know, crime syndicates and whatnot. But The interesting reason that Gracchus is kind of vital to this rebuilding effort is because Gracchus the Hutt actually, a long time ago, 30 odd years ago, used to have an incredible storehouse of Jedi lore and artifacts. And unfortunately, it was discovered by Darth Vader in the 501st Legion, and he had been arrested, and Vader took possession of all of those things. So that being said, Gracchus probably knows a little bit about this stuff, or at least still remembers it, because Lorsan Tekka actually visited Gracchus while he was in prison at one point. And so Gracchus, as a collector of Jedi artifacts, probably has a lot of knowledge kicking around his skull about Jedi and Force-related items. And so, otherwise, why would Lorsan Tekka go visit him? And in fact, part of the search for Lorsan Tekka that the Resistance was undertaking had to do with realizing, he visited Gracchus for some reason and breaking Gracchus out of a prison. And so because of that fact, I think Gracchus is slightly more inclined to be nicer to the Resistance than he is to the First Order, because First Order folks basically kind of tried to betray him and have him killed while he was on his prison planet situation. So yeah, I would say Gracchus is more kindly disposed to the Resistance by comparison. And so it turns out that, or at least there's an opportunity for Rey, if she really wants to get to know Gracchus the Hutt, she might be able to learn a lot from him. Surprise, surprise. So it's kind of strange to think that the rebuilding of the Jedi Order is going to hinge on the efforts of these very three unlikely people. Obviously, Rey, of course, the scavenger from in the middle of nowhere on Jakku, and C-3PO, a protocol droid who's been in operation for multiple decades, and Gracchus the Hutt, a crazy Hutt gangster who's been cybernetically enhanced over the years and can beat the heck out of anyone. So that, my friends, pretty much wraps up where we are with The Last Jedi. And there is a rumor kicking around about episode 9. Don't worry, it's not a spoilery thing necessarily, but we'll talk about it in just a second, just to frame everything else, because, we're talking about post-Last Jedi stuff. But first, I just want to say, if you're subscribing to the show, thank you so much for doing so. And if you're not, I hope you'll consider doing it. And I hope you'll also join the community at patreon.com/SW7X7 and get some insider rewards while you're at it. And so we still haven't gotten a teaser, a trailer, a title, or anything, but there was a report kicking around that Empire Magazine is confirming, and I can't find this anywhere on Empire Magazine's properties, so I don't know if this is legit or not. They do have a 2019 big movie issue that's coming out. It's supposed to hit newsstands on December 27th, so it's entirely possible that it's lurking in there or something. But there is a rumor kicking around about the timeline for when episode 9 is taking place. If you don't want to hear this rumor, then this is a good point for me to say, hey, thank you so much for joining me for the show, and you've got a second to drop out if you don't want to hear it. And I think that's probably warning enough. So if you're still listening to my voice, you probably want to hear it. The rumor is that episode 9 is going to take place 1 year after The Last Jedi. Not 5 years, not 10 years, but 1 year. I'm really kind of surprised to hear something like that. I would tend to doubt it. It seems like there's not enough time to muster up the kind of resistance, literally and figuratively, that needs to be mustered up in order for the First Order to be taken down, unless you want to say that the movie starts out 1 year later and then eventually jumps further in the timeline during the course of the movie. Then maybe I'll buy that. But yeah, 1 year doesn't sound right to me. I'd love to hear what you think about that, so drop me a comment wherever you happen to like to catch the show, or just on the website for the show, sw7x7.com. That is officially going to do it for the show, and like I said earlier, thank you so much for joining me for it. And, of course, may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2018 Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it!